Hello, welcome back. This is Cheryl, and for today, I would like to share a little bit about getting a helper because I've kind of been in the experience currently, so I felt that it would be quite relevant to share about my own personal experience, especially because I felt that it was quite challenging to learn about it. It's not that the resources are not there, it's actually all available, you can easily find it. But I felt that it's just nice to hear about someone who had been in a situation of finding a helper. Just to share a little bit more, because I think personally during my experience, I was very thankful to have a few friends that I could reach out to ask about, where should I start, agents that I can look out for, and also things to just be aware of when I'm hiring my own helpers to support in my household chores. I think starting off, maybe the first thing I kind of want to share about is why I wanted to hire a helper and a little bit more on what are possible reasons people might want to hire a helper. So in Singapore, actually, a lot of families do hire helpers. I think I don't know the percentage exactly, but with the lifestyle of Singaporeans, I think a lot of people do require the support of helpers to kind of offload some of the chores that they are working with, such as cooking, washing, and I think that's kind of bulk of the reason. And then another side of it is people that requires a little bit more support. So in case one, it could be taking care of elderly in the family, which I would say that I'm in that situation. And then in the case two, is the case of taking care of your child. If you're going back to work, especially for mothers or like families that recently have children, or they are busy with work without family members to help to take care. So I'll say those are the two main kind of reasons why people hire a helper. Of course, there could be other reasons related to it, but I could just want to give like an overview. And for me, the decision of getting a helper wasn't an easy conversation to have because I grew up not having a helper in my lifestyle, and it's not something that I've used to either. But it came to a situation in my life where I have to decide, would it be beneficial to get a helper? So maybe I share a little bit thought process on that as well. So I think being in a situation where, okay, maybe what situation? So firstly, I think I've already shared before earlier that I'm a Singaporean in Singapore with my parents staying together, and I'm the only child in his house in this household, and my parents are both retired, so they are most of the time staying at home, and I personally, because I'm working quite a bit, I don't actually have the luxury of time to take care of them and to be with them always, especially during daytimes. So although I have the benefit of working from home occasionally, because of the benefit of my company, which I'm super super grateful for, but the challenge that I face is, I think, in terms of the cooking and the household, because I'm also fearful of my parents' safety, because if they're home alone without any like support or like guidance, I'm also concerned about their safety. And something a bit more personal that maybe one day I can share a little bit more about is that my mom has a medical condition that requires a little bit of taking care of. She's actually doing quite well, but I think just to kind of offload some of the stress and just to make her a little bit more relaxed, I had this discussion with her to hire a helper to support the household needs. And I think it wasn't like an immediate conversation. I think it took probably like a couple of months before we came to agreement that we would want to hire a helper to join our family. I think the challenges that it comes about that I think a lot of people don't really share about is there is a little bit of friction in thinking of whether to hire a helper to begin with. Where it comes about is in my family, as I've mentioned earlier, is that we never had a helper, and we've never gotten used to having like another person in the household. So I think that's kind of the biggest challenge that we have, and things that we were a bit concerned about is, how would the day-to-day be in terms of cleaning, in terms of marketing like going to the market to buy stuff. How would that process be like? Do we need to be careful what we say to them? And it's essentially having like a new roommate that's staying with us. but at the same time they are going to be responsible for a lot of things at home in terms of like the kitchen, the storage, the cleaning. And I believe that a lot of families could be quite particular about this, of certain things in the household that should be done a certain way. And I think every household have their own way of doing things that may not be consistent if someone else joined the family. So I think that was kind of the bulk of the fiction. And I think that's really the majority of the reason. Secondly, also the cost, because it's additional cost to household. And I won't say it's a easy cost that I can, afford without thinking twice, without even thinking much. But it's definitely something that I have to consider through and make sure that I have enough finances to be able to afford to hire a helper to join my family. So that's kind of the segment one of why to hire a helper. And I think I kind of started a little bit talking about the next key point, which is the cost breakdown and the cost to look out for. So first off, I think it's very important. It's very important to note that, do you have the finances to afford hiring a helper? Firstly, if you are well to do and you need kind of household support, then I guess it is kind of good for you to hire a helper. But in the second case where you don't really have the financial stability, I would consider you to think twice before hiring a helper. First off, people always talk about the main cost is the money salary, but that is really not all. There's so much more cost that you need to consider. So starting from monthly salary, generally the salary range can go from, I believe, 500 to 900 or higher, or lower, depending on the nationality and their own experiences. Countries, I think I'm just reading off like a script that I kind of found online, a data I found online, is that some helpers, I think from Philippines and Indonesia, have a different minimum salary that are set by their government, which you need to follow according to. So starting from salary, there's a base pay that you need to go to provide. After the base pay, you actually need to include a, let me check what the written form is. Essentially, it's like there's a base day rate, but there's also the additional salary that you need to pay for their rest day. So based on Singapore's regulation, you need to give them minimally one Sunday off every month, and then the rest of the 3 Sundays, depending on the month itself, you can give additional off day to your helper, but this can be something that you discuss together with your helper. So that's something that you can consider of, it's not just the base salary, there's actually additional cost of the rest day. So this could be a breakdown on the main salary and then distributed into the rest of the day. So for example, if your helper takes leave on 2 days instead of 1 days, you need to pay them for 2 of the other day that they are not taking off. And of course they can take 4 days off on a Sunday if you really request them to, but I think most helper do not prefer that, because I think the main objective for them to kind of join in is to kind of work in Singapore is also to have more income. So of course you give them more leave day, they get to have less income. So I think it's not something that every helper would want to go for. So that's something to note for. Then next thing that is you need to note for, it's a monthly cost, is a levy that's paid through Ministry of Manpower in Singapore, and there's a standard rate of 300 per month. That's kind of the standard, but there are 2 cases where you get a concessionary oh my god, my English is breaking down on me, concessionary rate of $60 per month. This is especially for families with younger children and elderly. I think elderly, there's an age that you need to consider. I believe it's 65 and above, but I'm not too sure. So if I have the correct data, I will change it up here. Then the last group is for people with disability. So you really can see that the government is trying to give a bit of subsidy for those who require assistance from a helper. So that's kind of the initial monthly levy that you need to consider when hiring a helper. Then next up, things that you need to consider. These are something that I think is quite common that you know, but just really something that you need to take note on and you need to do a little bit of research about. So there is this initial agency fee that you need to consider. This amount can range anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000. And it really depends on the agency and the helper's profile. It basically kind of covers the cost of the placement, the paperwork, and sometimes trainings if required. So I think this portion here, there's quite a bit to talk about, which I think it's not really mentioned largely when you search online. So I'm just pulling out my own data to read through it. So it's a course that kind of all of them will kind of give you, but you really need to read through in detail to find out what is actually covered, because I think if you're looking through agencies that are registered by the MOM, it shouldn't be an issue. But of course, I think you should always take note of, like, what are the actual costs incurred and related to it. So okay, so in terms of agency fee, I'm going to be quite transparent to a certain extent of how much it costed for me to hire my helper, but I won't give too much details about my helper's salary because I think that's confidential also. But in terms of agency fee, I think because I was referred from a friend, in fact, actually, I spoke to 3 different agencies at the same time because I gotten reference from a few friends, and I didn't know which is like the best agency to speak to or like the best agency to work with. So what I did was kind of just, speak to more people, and from there, if I can find a helper that is kind of suitable for my household, that was my main priority when I was searching out for my helper. Yeah, so my main priority, so in terms of the agency fee, that's kind of the first thing that you look out for. It can go really from anywhere 1,000 to 3,000. Then the next thing you look out for is the document fee, which includes whether they are a new helper in Singapore or are they transfer helper. Transfer meaning that they have already been in Singapore prior and they are kind of changing employment. So different household. It also includes like any training program that if they didn't have prior experience of. Then another fee that you need to consider is the issue of the application and the issue of the work permit, because this is something that all helper will need to have before they can start working in Singapore. So the price of this is generally about 35 for application. Renewal is also 35. So I believe that's quite a standard fee that you need to consider. Then there is, I think, a few other fees that I wasn't covered for because I wasn't required. For example, like overseas processing fees if your helper is not based in Singapore. But my helper was actually in Singapore at the time where I was interviewing her and when she officially joined my family. So that's kind of things we need to look out for. And then there is also medical fee. This is a requirement, I believe, for all helpers that they need to go through a medical checkup before they are proven eligible to be a helper in Singapore. And that cost really depends on, which medical checkup they actually went for. The next thing, this is something that I never knew about prior actually. It is the medical insurance plus security bond. So usually these are kind of tied together. There's a 5,000 security bond that you need to pay for to get a helper, but this cost actually can be covered by purchasing a medical insurance which covers the security bond. So we need to cover, employers need to cover a medical insurance minimally of 60,000 coverage, and sometimes it does cover the security bond for 5,000. These are for eligible for all non-Malaysian helpers. If Malaysian helpers, I believe this 5,000 is not required, and it's just going to be the healthcare insurance that you need to look out for. So on my end, my agency recommended an insurance company that I believe they worked with, plus they recommended that, and it is the Tokyo Marine Insurance Package. So there's a few options in this package, and I think insurance wise you have to read through what your agency recommended to you, or you can do your own research. But the note is you must cover minimally 60,000, and if you want to cover more you can, but generally I think the minimum usually is sufficient. Then next thing that I want to mention is the placement fee. So for me, I didn't understand what is a placement fee initially, but essentially, from my understanding, is that this placement fee kind of covers the loan that the helper has kind of paid, requested the agency to pay for them. So in return, when you're paying their salary, the helper salary, you're actually kind of offsetting that payment for the behalf of your helper in the form of their income. So the first couple of months, you're kind of not paying the helper directly because you have already paid for them in terms of the loan that they have to the agency. So that's something that you can consider. So certain helpers have a longer period of I think loan back to the agency. It depends on how much they kind of borrowed from the agency itself. So it could be 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, or more or less. So if they are transfer helper, they may not have this additional placement fee, like not such a big amount. But I think it's really dependent on the conversation you have with your agency. So the next thing you need to look out for is the living expenses, which is something that is quite hard to predict. But these are expenses of the helper in terms of the food, toiletries, daily essentials, and also electricity bill, water bill, that I think a lot of people actually kind of missed out on in their initial budgeting. I tried to budget for it, but I don't think I got a very accurate spectrum, like estimate of how much that cost actually would be. So a general estimate is about additional 100 to 200 per month, which I think is quite accurate amount. So essentially, all in all, I think the average that you need to pay in a month is about, this is just based on an estimate from ChatGPT that I found, it's about 800 to 1,002 a month, depending on the salary, the expenses. But in terms of living expenses, I think something to note is I would say look out for water bill, electricity bill. Water bill wise, it's important is because there's actually one additional person staying in your house. So there's one more person showering, there's one more person using electricity, there's one more person eating as well. So all this adds on to the bill, um, especially water and electricity. And also because when you hire a helper, essentially their job is kind of to clean up the place, do the chores and all those stuff. And maybe without the helper, you might not be washing up as often. Maybe you're just cleaning up like once a week. But with a helper, there's a higher chance that they'll be cleaning actually daily, which means that they will use up more water to kind of clean up the space a little bit more. So very likely there's going to be a higher cost of water and electricity bill. So that's something that you really should take note of in terms of food as well. Something that I think usually isn't mentioned is it depends on your household whether you have any restriction. For example, in my household, we are a Chinese household, so we do eat pork meat. We don't eat beef, so that is those things you need to take note of. And then, for example, if your helper doesn't eat pork, you need to make sure that they have sufficient food to eat if they are not able to consume the same dinner that you are eating as well. Especially in a case where if a family is very Chinese focused, they drink a lot of like herbal soup. Most of the time, I think those are like pork or chicken, but pork is quite a part of the main cuisine in the Chinese culture. So it's something that you need to consider with your helper. Can they prepare the food? And then after they prepare, can they consume it if it's a religious thing for them? So that's something that you really need to be aware of. So if they can't eat it, you need to ask them to cook separately. Based on my experience with I think we try to minimize cooking pork as much as possible, but if there is a need to, we still get her help. But we of course won't ask her to eat something that is not of her religion. I think in my friend's case, basically they don't ask her to cook pork in the household because they kind of don't want to have a need to cook additional food separately. But they kind of just eat dishes that contains pork or non-halal food outside as much as they can, but not as the main restriction. So those are some costs that you need to consider. It's quite a big sum, especially because you need to consider that every month it's an additional 1,000. And especially if you're the sole breadwinner of the family, it's something you really need to be very careful about. Then the one-off cost in the beginning is also quite a big sum, so definitely make sure you have the right finance sufficient and do your math before you hire a helper. So that's kind of first thing to hire out. Then moving to your day-to-day, there are some things that you need to consider on how you choose your helper. I think these are things that you really don't have experience of prior, and you need to learn as you're going on it, but it's good to do your research. So firstly, you need to make sure you know who you're hiring for. Who you are hiring for, meaning who is the person that will be facing this helper the most, or working with them closely. Secondly, also, who is the one that secondly also take note, what are the needs that you require, is there any things that you need to avoid, and then what experiences are you looking out for, what nationality, and any language concern that you have. So firstly, should your helper be good at taking care of children, or are they good for elderly, or are they more there for cleaning purposes? So you need to make sure that what are the requirements you have. That's the first thing. Secondly, look at their experiences. Do they have relevant experiences, or are they willing to learn from the experiences that is required on your end? And I personally believe it's great to have conversation with the helper before you hire them. Have a call with them, or even better, speak to them in person. And then another thing that I personally felt was very critical was because my parents are the one that is going to be more closely interacting with her versus myself, because I will be in the office at work most of the time, so I may not actually interact with her as much as compared. So I wanted to make sure that the helper that I hire is someone that my parents feel comfortable with and are able to get close to, and feel comfortable around, especially because they are very concerned that what if the helper is someone they can't get along with and they have any friction getting along. So those are things that I felt was very important. Then next is language barrier. This one, I think it's quite important, especially if you're asking your helper to take care of someone elderly, if they don't speak English or they don't speak a common language. So in my case, my parents speak very simple English, which I think is sufficient, and the helper that I hired is able to speak simple English as well. So I think that was a decent match that we managed to get. But I've seen situation where the helper and the main person in the household is not able to have a good communication because of a language barrier, and that creates a lot of friction for the family and for the helper as well. So it's easy to lead to misunderstanding and also leads to dissatisfaction and anger even possibly. So it's important to stay patient, but I think language, if there is a lot of challenge, it may not be a good match either. So take note of that. If it's really required to hire someone that can understand Chinese, go for it. Although I believe Chinese speaking helpers are a little bit more pricey, because there's also a demand for it. Because a lot of elderly don't speak English and they are the main person that the helper is going to work with. So something to take note of. Then next is also kind of respect. I'm just reading off ChatGPT at this point. For this point here is respect and training to give your helper kind of clear instruction. It's something that I'm working with to understand, because essentially by hiring a helper, you are basically an employer, and it's my first time being an employer. In my entire life, I've always been an employee. I've never been an employer. So knowing how to treat the helper, your helper, is also kind of making sure that they are employee and you're taking good care of them. Your employee need to know what to do, so you need to give them clear instruction. You need to give them fair treatment. You cannot be like telling them, oh, do this, do that, but they don't know what they're doing, or like they don't know what to do. So you need to make sure you give them clear instructions, what to look out for, what to not do what to do. I mean, of course, you can't be micromanage them, but you need to give them a quite detailed, clear understanding of what things they should be doing and what to look out for. Then that's on the side of the helper. Another thing that you need to look out for preparation for yourself is that if you're a first time employer for hiring a helper, you do need to go through a quick course called, I think, EOP. Let me check what it stands for. So it's called the Employer Orientation Program. Based on MOM, this is a 3-hour program to help you understand your responsibility as an employer, but really it's not 3 hours long. They have the flexibility of doing like a physical classroom workshop or a online one. Online one is slightly cheaper. I think a class workshop is $35 to $60 range, and if you do online, it's $35. And once you register, it's kind of an immediate thing. You register, you can sign up for the class immediately for the online version. And it essentially talks about things that you should look out for as an employer. It's some of the stuffs are very common knowledge or like common sense and you should already know. But it's also good to the run through like in terms of safety, also treating your helper with respect. And I think there was a case they were mentioning like actually the helper can develop depression and how you can help to reduce that situation and what to do in those kind of occasions. So those are things that they kind of educate you on in the EOP class. I felt it was quite useful, although a little bit um, outdated in some of the content design that they have, but I think that's kind of just the way government stuff is. But the content is there. It's quite clear on what you should do, what you shouldn't do, medical care, healthcare, wellness, rest days, kind of things. And another thing that I just want to highlight, I haven't been in that situation yet, but you need to take care of medical care. So if there's any like dental pain, you need to bring them to a dentist. If they have any like healthcare issues, like they're not feeling well, you need to bring them to the polyclinic or the GP. So those are your responsibilities and you need to pay for them. Transportation wise also, you need to manage their transportation on whenever they're working. In terms of healthcare, just thought my head right now is that um, although you purchase insurance, if they get injured doing non-work stuff, you cannot use it to claim in the insurance itself. It's really for workplace injury. For example, they are doing something at the home and then they fell and they injured, then that's kind of something you can claim. But if they got injured outside or like they are doing non-work stuff, it's not counted. So you do need to be careful of that as well. And there are some things that you cannot let your helper do. Things like hanging laundry outside or like anything that's dangerous. They can laundry, but I think it needs to make sure that they are able to do it safely. Then things that they also can't do is they actually can't clean window outside. I think when I was young, I saw some helper doing that, but I realized it's very dangerous, and I'm glad that the government kind of put restriction that you don't let them clean the outside window. So it's something that just kind of protects their safety as well, because you don't want to have any issue with their safety in when you are the employer, because there's going to be a lot of repercussion and issues that you need to deal with afterwards. Okay, then something to just kind of talk through about is also, I think these are things you only start to realize when you really work closely with your helper. So you need to set boundaries and you need to set the routine early. Just like how you hire an employee, you need to tell them what they can do, what they can't do, which I mentioned earlier. And the routines need to be provided to them so that they know what to do. And you should have a regular check-in, just like how a boss will have a check-in with their own employee. And don't overload your helper, because that may lead to burnout, which might affect their performance also. So I've spoke to a lot of helpers before I hired my current one, actually, because I just want to make sure I interview them and see who is the good match for my family. And I've seen some helper who were too burnt out. They were actually originally signed for a 3 years contract, but they decided to cancel the contract earlier because they didn't want to stay in the family any longer. So this kind of cases does happen where the helper doesn't want to stay in the household any longer. So make sure that you don't overload your helper. Make sure that it's sufficient for them to do, but not anything that's overbearing. And if there's any documents, make sure you keep them updated. Insurance, healthcare, health checkup. You don't need to do buy annually check up for your helper to see their health is okay, and just to make sure things are good. So that's kind of the main thing. Then in terms of cooking, if you do have a helper to help you to cook, don't assume that they know what dishes they want that they can cook for you. You will have to get in a conversation with them on like what dishes to cook, what to avoid. Do you want to make it less salty, less oily? Those you need to inform them. They won't know without you informing them. So make sure to check that. And then aside from that, I think you just need to make sure that you have your right documents. Speak to your agency properly. Then yeah. Then I think going to like a summary, I guess the main thing to highlight is that you need to know about the real cost of hiring a helper. It's not a one-time cost. There is a one-time lump sum cost, but after that it's a continuous cost. And the total cost I think in the entire year can go up to like 10,000 and more. So you need to definitely be very concerned, be very cautious about it. You need to follow MOM regulations very carefully as well, because I think MOM can be quite strict. Then you need to communicate clearly with them, treat your helper with respect, just as how you treat any other human being with respect. You are not just hiring like a helper, they are actually part of your family if you think about it, because they are the ones staying in your house, they are the ones taking care of family. So you don't want to get to a situation where they feel unhappy and they don't want to, help out anymore. So I think it's so if you found this video helpful, I think it's exactly the objective that I wanted to provide, because I think I kind of wanted to have like a face-to-face chat with people, or when I first started this process of hiring a helper. And I was actually very fortunate. I met with a friend who also hired a helper not too long ago, maybe just like a couple of years before me. So I could speak to them and understand their experience of hiring a helper and the process of it. So I think it gave me a bit more understanding and a bit more confidence on what to look out for, especially like things that I should be aware of. I think one thing that a lot of people don't mention is you kind of want to know your helper better, like as a person, or who is their family, how is their family doing. Usually they have a family back home, either children or like their husband. So those with families like children's, it's kind of good to know like who is taking care of their children at home, because some cases is the child is kind of like missing the parent, and they would actually ask the parent to go back home, like the mom itself, like the helper. So this case situation, if it happens, there's a chance where your helper might choose to end the contract earlier and go back home. So if it's not something that you want to deal with, or like you felt it's a bit tricky, or like more hassle, I think just speak to your helper and understand what's her intention of staying in Singapore. How long do they plan to stay to work here? Because I think it will also something that you need to think of, like if they're not planning to stay for long, you may need to hire another helper in like short period of time. Then let's say there are children at home, who is taking care of them? If there's no one taking care of them, probably they'll be quite concerned as well, so you need to call back a lot, or doing to like travel back a bit. And then another thing to take note is like whether your helper actually have a lot of loan back home, because the more loan that they have will also mean that they are more sensitive towards money. So it's something that you need to be very careful about and just look out for. So I think that's kind of all I want to share about, or like all that I know of. Feel free to drop a comment below, share any questions that you have, or your own personal experience hiring a helper. Because for me, I would say it's still a learning journey for me. I'm still a new employer, like a first time employer. So I think I just want to share the experience with you guys, and kind of hope that it's helpful. So if you're considering to hire a helper, I hope this has been some tips that you kind of learn, and just like one place for you to kind of reach all this. But of course, you can do much research online. I've actually found a lot of research just through Googling and like watching some YouTube videos to learn about the process. And I think the fastest way is actually speak to an agent. I think the agent I spoke to, they've all been super helpful, and I think it's really just speaking to them. I think that's the first step to kick off. But of course, think through your finance, and the people you're hiring. Those two are the things you need to look out for. I would say that's the main thing if you had to just summarize the two, if I just had to summarize two main points in this video. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.